Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Julio Godinez, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar, Nokia Threat Intelligence Report 2021 Insights and Findings, brought to you by Nokia. We have a great webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping announcements. Today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again for on-demand viewing. We will be sending out a link to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit securityboulevard.com/webinars. We want to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A tab. We also encourage discussions by using the chat tab, so let us know your thoughts or just say a quick hello. Finally, stick around until the end because we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stay tuned to see if you're a winner. And finally, joining me today is Kevin McNamee, Head of Threat Intelligence Lab, Nokia. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn off my camera, and let Kevin begin.
Okay, hi there, folks. I'm glad you could make it today. So what my name is, as was said, it's Kevin McNamee. I run the Nokia Threat Intelligence Lab, and annually we produce a report. And this webinar is a summary of our findings in that report. The threat report was just released on Monday, and you can get copies of that. I've got a link at the end of the presentation, but you can also get it straight off of Nokia's website. So a little bit of background. We've been publishing this report annually since about 2015. And the data we get that's input into the report comes from, it's aggregated data from mobile and fixed networks, covering about a couple of hundred million devices around the world. This comes from a system that we have. It's a network-based malware detection and monitoring system that is deployed by communication service providers, both fixed carriers and mobile carriers. And what this system does is it monitors the data plane traffic, and it's looking for signs of malware activity, such as command and control traffic, exploit attempts, DDoS attacks, various scanning activities, and also, of course, hacking. So based on this, we're getting this information with our customers allow us to share that information with us, as long as it's sort of aggregated and anonymized. And that's the information that goes into this report. So this is, real data collected from the service provider networks. So I'll just go through a brief summary of the report, and then I'll take a little bit of a more of a deep dive into some of the aspects that we regard as being fairly important. So this slide here provides the basic summary. We're primarily deployed in mobile networks, so that's the first thing we do is we've been tracking infection rates, malware infection rates in mobile networks for quite some time now. In 2020, the infection rate was about 0.23%. Throughout 2021, it seemed to level off at about 0.12%. Now, let me explain this number. We basically measure this number on a monthly basis. So at any given time, on those mobile networks that we're deployed in, we see about 0.12% of the devices have some sort of malware infection. Okay, it's not just we see sort of like attacking activity aimed at the device. These are devices that actually we've identified malware actively on the device itself. Okay, so that's it gives you an idea of the sort of the scale of the malware issue on mobile devices. So that's, in any given month, 1 out of 1,000 devices is some significant malware event takes place on it. And so that's the thing. And this is sort of leveled off in 2021. Now, when we look at the devices in the mobile network, about half of the devices that are infected with malware are Android devices. These seem to be the most targeted device. There's two main reasons for this. The first reason is that people can basically sideload applications onto their phone. The majority of malware issues on mobile phones is caused by people downloading trojanized applications. And on the Android platform, that's very easy to do. So that's sort of the main reason that they have a fairly high impact. The other reason is Android's got a fairly wide footprint. So it's very popular. I mean, Android, there's lots of manufacturers use the Android operating system. And so it's got a fairly large footprint. So that's why we see that. Later on, I'll give you a breakdown from some of the other devices in the network, and we'll get to that in a little bit. In fixed residential networks, this would be, a cable type environments, or just fixed residential, fixed broadband. What we noticed, the infection rate, when COVID started, the infection rate took a bit of a jump in these residential networks. And we attribute that to the fact that people were working from home. And there was a whole bunch of challenges that posed. The good news is that in 2021, this is sort of leveled off. It's still higher than it was pre-COVID, but at least it's leveled off and it's sort of stabilized. So that's pretty good. Now, types of attacks, trends in attacks that we noticed and things that are going on. This year, definitely was supply chain attacks that we'll talk about. And also IoT botnet activity is continuing to rise. So we'll cover those a little bit. I'll get some specific slides on those two topics here. We also noticed in certain regions, banking Trojans have certainly increased their activity. And they tend to be, it used to be banking Trojans would focus on your laptop, your Windows type of platform. But now we notice that they're targeting mobile devices. And so this is a fairly recent trend, and we'll cover that also with a few slides later on. Also in the report, you'll see we've been doing an analysis of how are people getting their Trojanized applications into the app stores. Okay, and there's a section on that that's covered. It's covered in detail in the report. I won't talk to you. It's a fairly large topic, so I won't talk too much more about it today. So you read the report for that one. And finally, I think we've noticed in the Macintosh platform and the Apple Mac platform, there's been an increase in malware there, but primarily it's adware. So we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so that's the summary. Now I'm going to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of these topics. So let's just jump in here. So we talked about malware in mobile networks and that infection rate. So you can see here in 2021, it was steady at about 0.12% per month. So that's the trend you see there. So you see it took a bit of a dip from previously down to this level. Okay. And I think the reason for that is simply people are becoming, the app stores have been doing a really good job of making sure that they keep Trojanized malware applications out of them. And I think people are also becoming a bit more savvy, taking care of the security on their devices. So you can see that's a fairly reasonable trend for 2021. Now, the downside is that in our threat lab, we do actively collect malware from various sources around the internet, and we will then analyze that malware, and that's what we use to build our detection rules. So we actually run the malware in a sandbox environment. We let it communicate, and we look at the traffic that it's generating, and then we write detection rules based on that traffic. So as you can see in this other graph down here, the number of mobile malware samples that we're processing is continuing to increase. So the attackers are still actively creating new flavors, new versions of malware. And so it's, the trend here is that the malware hasn't gone away. This hasn't become flat because the malware's disappeared. The malware continues to be created, and they continue to be sort of fairly active in that area. So that's our take on mobile network infection rates. So if we look at fixed residential networks, this is basically home networks, people at home. We did notice that this, if you look here, this is 2020. Basically, COVID comes along, and we did notice a fairly steady increase in 2020 in residential malware infections, and we attributed that, and I think very correctly, to the fact that people were working from home. There was also the COVID presented an opportunity to spread more malware using, the typical mechanisms. Phishing, you'd get email, text messages telling you about how to get how to get sources of COVID information, how to sign up for a vaccination. So the phishing opportunities were quite key, and enabled the malware, the cyber criminals to take advantage of that. And the second aspect, of course, is also the fact that people were working from home, and home networks were not as secure as the networks people were used to using at work. The good news is that I think this has turned around. So you can see this is December 2021, and we've sort of leveled off at about 2.5%. And again, that's a monthly figure. So that's the good news. And I would attribute that to the workforce appears to have adapted to this working from home model. And they've probably also got a lot better at avoiding the standard COVID phishing attacks that are trying to get you to, click here to download the tracking software and click here to get a application that can, tell you where to get your vaccination, that type of thing. So that's the fixed residential story. This slide here, and by the way, all of this material is in the report. So you can, the slide deck is sort of a summary of the report. So you can get all of this. These are actually charts from the report. So if we look at malware by device type, this is what I said before. So here you see the Android is at about 50%. Okay. Windows PCs continue to make up a fairly large component. Even in mobile networks, Windows PCs are when they're tethered, or they're tethered through a phone or connected through a dongle. We still see a lot of activity in the Windows laptop type of thing. Remember, we're looking at this data is coming from looking at endpoint devices, typically consumer devices, either in the home or on the mobile network. We're not talking here about like data center type of thing. This is consumer devices that are out there. Or sometimes we get, in this case here, it's IoT. So this might be devices that are run by enterprise, but they're out there on the mobile or the fixed broadband network. So IoT devices specifically about 13%. And then we get into OS X. This is the Mac. This is mostly Mac adware. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then finally, there's the remainder, which is sort of your iPhone and stuff. iPhone's a very secure, at least it's not impacted by malware as much as the other devices. And the main reason for this is because Apple does a very good job of protecting their app store. You can only get an app, an iPhone app from Apple's App Store. You can't sideload it. You can't go to third-party stores. So that's a that's the main reason that they're so secure. It's not inherently any more secure than the Android or other types of operating systems. It's simply the fact that they keep the App Store. So they put up barriers to being able to get those Trojanized apps in there. They're very good at that. So that's sort of the breakdown. Here I give you a list of the malware we've been seeing. This is just the top 20 list. So you can probably for people familiar with the sort of malware, they'll be familiar with some of these names. You see it ranges from adware. We've got a Bitcoin miner. We've got banking Trojan, hacker toolkit. There's all sorts of Mirai stuff out there that's going on. The typical list of your major, the usual suspects, as it were. Again, this is the most prolific malware based on when we say prolific, this is the most samples, the most widespread malware. And you can see here again, it's the usual sort of list of usual suspects. And we break it down here into the type of malware. So you can see the Trojan is 18%, downloaders 14, backdoors 12, bots 10, so on and so forth. It just gives you a nice breakdown to see what people are doing out there. So that's that. So those are sort of the general trends that we've been seeing. And now what I'd like to do is take a bit of a deeper dive into some of these topics that we think are significant in this year, and we focus on in the report. So one of the first ones we've got here is IoT botnet activity. Now, back in 2016, there was Mirai, and the Mirai source code was actually released onto the internet. Now, this was sort of a bit of a game changer in the IoT botnet area. And the reason it was is that Mirai had a specific type of architecture to it. And when the source code was released, it spawned a whole bunch of sort of spin-offs of this using the same type of techniques. And the basic main thing about Mirai was the fact that once a device was infected with Mirai, it then spent most of its time scanning the network in its vicinity or anything it could see, looking for other victims. And when it found a victim, it would then check in with its command and control, and that would mean that victim would then be infected with Mirai. Okay, and the new infected victim would then start scanning for other victims. So Mirai introduced this concept of a sort of a self-creating botnet. The botnet expanded itself. Each bot recruited additional bots to the botnet. Okay, so that type of technique, and it was using obviously various vulnerabilities to break in. So that technique meant that these botnets were sort of self-creating. You start off with a few devices infected, and then they would scan the network and make the botnet bigger and bigger. And in fact, sometimes botnets would actually take over other botnets, because let's say you're focusing on one vulnerability, and one flavor of botnet takes over all the devices that have that vulnerability, and then a couple of weeks later, another botnet goes out and takes advantage of the same vulnerability to steal that botnet away. So it's been kind of a game. You can see here first of all, we've definitely noticed the number of vulnerabilities that are being exploited. I mean, there's lots of vulnerabilities out there, but the number of vulnerabilities that are being exploited by these IoT botnets these days is steadily increasing. You can see this chart up here. So here we're looking at, this goes back to 2010, and there we go. It's getting bigger. It's sort of a linear trend, but it's definitely increasing. The more vulnerabilities that are available, it means that it makes the bot more likely to be able to spread to a variety of different types of devices, because it just has to find a device that has that specific vulnerability, and it breaks in. And that device gets added to the botnet, and then it also participates in this process. So two things: number of vulnerabilities is steadily increasing, and botnet activity is definitely increasing. Here you can see this. Back in the past, botnets existed. That's around about 2014. Here we get 2016. This is Mirai when it started out. And then over the years, we've got, it's built up. And it's built up because there's more varieties based on this sort of Mirai technology, based on the Mirai paradigm of having the bot expand the botnet. So you can see it's sort of increasing with time. Okay. So I think the trends, we've noticed this year alone, 100% growth in IoT infection rates. They're definitely using much more sophisticated attack strategies. And that's something these bots are using multiple vulnerabilities to spread. They're not just focusing on one. They're using a number of them. We've actually seen botnets. I think the Mosey botnet is now using a peer-to-peer command and control infrastructure. So it's much more flexible in terms of the command and control itself, but also a lot more difficult to take down, because there's no single command and control location that you can take out to sort of disable the bot. It's peer-to-peer. It spreads itself out through the network. So I think that's our basic trends in IoT botnets. Now, the type of devices that are involved in these botnets we're observing are devices that are, visible on the internet. Okay. Because that's what we're monitoring. We're monitoring the consumer, enterprise, residential, mobile devices, things out there on the network. So these are typically, they're not your we're not inside people's houses monitoring their smart fridges and smart toasters. What we're doing is we're sort of seeing things like the smart meters, kiosks, video surveillance cameras. There's a lot of sort of Wi-Fi routers, residential gateways, and stuff that are also in this category of device that's impacted. I've provided a list. I don't expect you to. I'm not going to go through this list and read it all to you, but this just gives you an idea of the top 20 vulnerabilities that these IoT botnets are exploiting. Okay, and this list is in the report, so you can basically see that. I mean, the brute force telnet attack was the one that the original Mirai used, and then now it seems as people they're focusing more on brute force SSH login. So I guess the message there is make sure you don't have default or commonly used passwords in these things. But then there's a whole bunch of other more sophisticated vulnerabilities that are being exploited. And as you can see by some of the names here, it's exploiting things like, for example, your MikroTik router. So that's a home gateway that is being used by D-Link, type thing. So this is, as I said, this is the list. I think our main takeaway for IoT devices is that they're typically, they're not protected by any antivirus or firewalls. Nobody's actually monitoring them often to see if they're actually working. So they're very exposed. And our takeaway from this is that if you've got an IoT device that's visible from the internet and it's got a vulnerability, and a lot of them have vulnerabilities, literally that will be exploited in a matter of minutes, because the scanning activity on the network looking for vulnerable devices it's incredible. It goes on all the time. It's the majority of the malware traffic that we actually see. Okay, so that's the takeaway. If the device is visible and vulnerable, it's going to become part of a botnet. Okay, so I'd like to switch gears here and take a bit of a look at banking Trojans. The basic idea of a banking Trojan is the fact that it hangs about on your device. And when you try and do electronic banking, it sort of wakes up and goes, "Woohoo, this guy's doing something. He's going to his bank." And what it will try and do is it will try and get your credentials. User ID and password is the fundamental one that it's going to try and get. Sometimes banking Trojans also try and get your credit card information. I mean, there's a lot of variation in what they do, but they basically lurk in the background on the infected device. And when you visit your bank, they wake up and then start trying to get your credentials. Okay. They do this in a number of ways, and we'll go through some of the, one of the main ways is that when you visit your bank, they basically are hooked into your browser. So when you're typing stuff in, they're just sucking it up and sending it back to their home base. There's other types of techniques they can use. One of the things is that banks obviously introduce, that sort of single password authentication, two-factor authentication and stuff like that to try and get around this problem, which is very good. But then let's say you send the special password through an SMS message. We actually have banking Trojans that live on phones these days that will intercept that SMS message and steal the one-time password right out of that. So that's actually a technique that's been used for quite a few years. So the ones we noticed this year in 2021, they were mostly focused on the Android phone. These things typically started back years ago on your laptop, PC type thing. And now they're migrating to the mobile devices because that's where people are really doing all their stuff these days, is on their mobile. Some of the things we've seen this year. This is just I give 4 of them as examples, and there's been a lot more, but these are sort of the top ones we've been looking at. So if we look at FluBot, the way you typically get this on your device is it comes as disguised as a package tracking app. Okay, so this is actually, with the advent of COVID, people are ordering stuff online all the time now. So there's a lot more packages being delivered to people around the world these days than there was maybe, say, 10 years ago. So this is a really good way to get the malware onto that platform. It's an app for tracking your packages. So it's the phishing attack that's used to get this installed is a lot more effective these days than it was a while ago. So you basically go out and then you receive a bogus SMS message. There's a parcel going to be delivered. You download the stuff. It gets on your phone and it basically just disappears into the background. Okay. And then when you visit your bank, it wakes up and it does that credential stealing thing. Now, banking Trojans typically are very regional focused and sometimes very specific bank focused, because one of the common techniques that they use is that when you visit your bank, they will put up a fake screen that you think you're visiting your bank, but you're not. You're actually talking to their command and control. So it's either directly or indirectly through a sort of an exfiltration type of thing. But so it's focused on the bank, a specific bank. You might have the whatever bank you happen to do business with. So there's that. There's also very specific. They're obviously doing this in the native language of the location. So banking Trojans tend to be location focused and specific bank focused, which means there's a whole industry. You can actually get a sort of a toolkits for building banking Trojans that will enable you to put in, here's what the screen looks like, here's the various parts. So you can get the banking Trojan as a service type of approach to it. So the other one, and they all use these similar techniques, but T-Bot, it comes disguised as a video app. And this one's a little bit different from the typical banking Trojans, because what it does is acts as a remote access Trojan. So what it does is it allows the attacker to, when you connect to your bank, he can basically connect and see everything you're doing. Okay, so that's how they do that, and he can also capture the keystrokes that you're typing in and stuff. So that's pretty scary. It's like you're sitting there, doing online banking, and there's some guys looking over your shoulder at everything you're doing. That's pretty scary. BlackRock is disguised as an Android update. That's how it gets on your platform. So you update your system, and then it uses the traditional, login screen overlays and SMS message capture to get the banking credentials. So that's more of BlackRock is more of your traditional banking Trojan. It does everything that they do. You logging in, but it's actually captured your screen, and it also intercepts the one-time password sent through SMS. This one, Cerberus, it's been around since 2019. And it's one of these ones that's leased to malicious actors to collect the banking credentials in their region. So it's sort of like a toolkit. You get Cerberus, and then you can build it for a specific bank that you want to attack, a specific group of people that you want to target. And it leverages actually TeamViewer to allow the attacker to get remote access to the device. So this also uses that getting over, looking over your shoulder as you're doing your banking. So that's the banking Trojan aspect. And as I said, we noticed this has increased, 80% increase this year, the first half of this year over the first half last year. And mostly these ones you're showing here are mostly focused on Android. So the switch from the typical laptop approach to now your mobile device. Okay, so switching gears again. I think in 2021, there was some major supply chain attacks that took place. Early on in the year, there was SolarWinds. Hackers installed a backdoor in their Orion network management platform. So in other words, hackers broke into SolarWinds, and they put this backdoor into one of their major products. And then, of course, this was distributed as an update, and the update actually went out to about 18,000 customers. And these customers, the SolarWinds, this is the Orion software, by the way, it's used for network management. So this is the tool that people are using to manage their network. So when you've got a backdoor in it, it allows the attackers to come in to the thing that's managing your network. Now that's a pretty scary thing. So this very popular software, and it was used by U.S. government agencies, Fortune 500 companies, universities, hospitals, and it was actually one well-known security firm that was that actually reported on this, and they reported on it because they had very good experience because they actually got hacked by this, and so it made quite a splash in the security community. So that was SolarWind, and that was at the beginning of the year. Later on, Code Cove, another example. This is just I've given a couple of examples of what these supply chain attacks look like and why to illustrate why they're so dangerous. What Code Cove provides, code coverage is what it does. So it provides reports. This is a software package you can get if you're developing applications or whatever. You can get Code Cove to provide reports of your test coverage. Okay, so this is used with one of these continuous integration, continuous delivery type systems that you would, as you make changes to code and this automatic testing takes place. This gives you a report on how the testing's gone and how your application looks from a development / testing perspective. So the way this works is that if you're a Code Cove customer, you will basically activate this process where they're going to create the report. What it does is it actually downloads a script from Code Cove's website. It runs that script in your environment, and that script collects all the information that's needed to run the report and produce the data. Then they take that data, they create the report for you, and you're good to go. So the key thing here is that actually every time you're running one of these reports, you're reaching out to Cove Code, downloading this script and running it in your environment. Okay. Now, hackers injected code into that script. And what the code did is once some data had been collected, it would then exfiltrate that data. And what they were looking for in that data was anything that would give them access credentials. Okay. Anything they could use to break into that network. And they were actually successful. The compromise, as I said, the compromise script was dynamically downloaded from their website and into the customer's environment each time a report was done. So what it basically did is it shipped off any useful information it found back to the attacker's command and control. And so some of the things that this was used to this actually successfully did, and there's more details in the threat report that you can find out what actually happened here. But the access credentials was subsequently used to, one, steal signing certificates. Now, you can imagine the impact that might have on a major software firm if their signing certificates were stolen. They also managed to steal source code. And a number of other things. So this was pretty significant type of thing. I think the key takeaway I've got with the supply chain stuff is that the industry in general, software industry, is moving towards this continuous integration, continuous delivery system. Okay, where you actually are dropping relatively fresh code onto your customer systems. You're updating it regularly. And what this is, we have to be careful here, because when we've got these automatic updates being pushed out, they open the attack surface for this type of supply chain attack. Okay. And that's something we have to be very, very aware of. If there's any time you're automatically giving updates to customers, that update channel can be used for these supply chain attacks. So we have to watch that. Word of caution. Another big story in 2021 was ransomware as a service. I'm sure you're all familiar with these stories. The Colonial Pipeline, which supplies 45% of the fuel for the U.S. East Coast, they got attacked. That shut down their pipeline for a while. There was fuel shortages, panic buying at the pumps. State of emergency in 18 states, and they paid 4.4 million in Bitcoin to get this thing fixed. A lot of that was actually apparently recovered by the FBI. So this was driven by the dark side ransomware as a service. That's what was used for this. So ransomware as a service is that they provide the tools to do the data encryption, data exfiltration, and also even communicate with the quote ransomware victim. So it's actually, you know, you can go out and buy the software package from Darktrace and then start doing your ransomware as a service. And what you do is you actually pay the dark side people, the business model, if you want to refer to it that way, is that they get a cut of the action. So dark side gets a cut of whatever you get from your exploits. Later on in the year, there was an attack on Kaseya. Again, REvil, which is also a ransomware as a service provider like DarkSide. What they did is they actually discovered a 0-day vulnerability in KSA's VSA software. And so they used that vulnerability. But first of all, let's say that software is used by managed service providers, people who manage IT infrastructure for small to medium business. Okay. So in other words, they basically hacked into the KSA's software and put the ransomware in that. So when the attack was launched, the attack was launched against 50 managed service providers. It affected 1,500 businesses, millions of computers, and they basically demanded 70 million for a universal decryptor that would fix all the cases. Now, I don't think it quite worked out. And there's been a lot of arrests and stuff made in this area because they sort of like, and they've been REvil's been up and down like a yo-yo over the past 6 months. But I think that the takeaway here is that these guys actually used a supply chain type of attack to do the ransomware stuff. Okay, so and also they could automatically hack. They provided let me put it this way: DarkSide just does the ransomware part. They don't give you stuff to break into the system. So with DarkSide, you have to break into your system yourself. You have to figure out how to get into the system. Then you deploy the DarkSide ransomware in the system. REvil, first of all, found a way to break into the system automatically and use the supply chain attack to deploy the ransomware, okay, as a service. So the ante's getting up. Now, if you think back, the NotPetya incident, which was a number of years ago, was one of the most expensive attacks in history. It was estimated to have caused $10 billion in damages. It was a triple threat, okay? It combined ransomware. You know, so the ransomware was actually just there to encrypt the system and do as much damage as possible, encrypted all the data, made the systems unusable. It was distributed by a supply chain attack. There was some software called Medoc, which was some accounting software. And what the guys for this NotPetya thing did is they hacked into Medoc and dropped the ransomware component into a component of this accounting software, which was then distributed automatically as an update to the accounting software. Okay. Then, just to make matters worse, once you get one system infected in your network, it spreads automatically through the network using an internal blue exploit. So that's what I mean, the triple threat: ransomware, supply chain attack to get a foothold, worm-like behavior to spread throughout the network. So let's hope that the REvil and the DarkSide guys don't learn a lesson from what the NotPetya people managed to do. I think it's this last part is the thing that was missing from it. Okay, so last thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is Mac adware. Adware, the way adware generates income, obviously, is that it puts ads up, and they make money from the fact that they're displaying the ads. What differentiates adware, malicious adware, from regular applications that leverage leverage through advertising, is that the malicious adware is typically installed using subterfuge. The person doesn't know it's being installed, and then it's very difficult to remove. Okay, so we're not talking here just about apps that are monetized through advertising. We're talking about apps that get on your device, excuse me, get on your device by using a sort of an illegal means, and then make it very difficult to uninstall it. And there's been a significant increase, I think, in the Mac platform. And the reason for this is a couple of things. I think malware developers have started using sort of specially crafted application bundles. They found a way to get stuff installed on a Mac without the user being able to, without the user having to go through the whole process of accepting it and the application being correctly signed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's this flaw, by the way, has been patched. It was patched in April, so they can no longer use that technique. But still, attackers are using. They can either disguise their adware as a legitimate app and get it officially signed, and eventually it'll be taken down once people discover what it is. But you can get stuff through the Apple store that way, and some other adware creators have simply stopped signing them at all. They basically just provide instructions as how do you install this app without having to go through, it's not signed, it's not sanctioned by Apple, but we'll teach you how to get it installed on your system because you really want to install this really good app. And then you find out it's actually just adware. We list over here the top 10 just to sort of give you an idea of the names of them. So that's a trend we've noticed. So I think that is the content of from the threat report. The threat report's available, and it contains more details than obviously I've been able to give you in the past 45 minutes. Now, what's Nokia doing about this? So we have, obviously, as you can tell, we've got the ability to detect stuff out there in the network. So once you can detect it, what can you do about it? Okay, so working in one mirror, this is the area, it's called extended detection and response, and it's designed for the security operations people who run these networks. So what this does is it provides the detection part, which we've already got, but that's a minor component. The main thing is the analytics and intelligence, the machine learning aspect that you bring into it. So you've got all these events coming in from the network, okay? And then you basically apply some machine learning and analytics to that. And then the key thing is you can automate the response. So it's the automation and orchestration of responding to that security event. Now, this is designed for your security operations people within the network, okay? And so as you can see down here, you get the analytics, threat intelligence, and the automated analysis. Okay. Now we've given this a kind of a neat name. We call it Cybersecurity Dome, which is powered by the XDR security operations solution. And what Cybersecurity Dome is designed to do is when it discovers some, like for example, an emergency situation in your network, maybe there's been a very large DDoS attack, or there's some network outage, or even if there's just some external event that might impact the operation of the network infrastructure, like it could be completely external, some sort of political emergency or something like that. Cybersecurity Dome enables the operator to put their network into a sort of a lockdown state. Like, in other words, harden it for the emergency event that's actually occurring. So that's the idea there. And what it does is it uses the detection, the analytics, machine learning, and then the automated response to actually handle that. So that's your CyberDome monetized. And the service providers can use this not just for their own network operations, but if they're offering, they can offer this as a service to their enterprise customers. So it's sort of a security as a service. And this, by the way, is specifically one of the main use cases is, of course, for end-to-end security for the new 5G networks that are currently coming online today. Okay. So you can learn more. You can read the full report. Here's the sort of the links down here. You've got the Nokia Threat Intelligence Center, Nokia NetGuard Security website. They're available. And I recommend, if you haven't got the report already, get a copy of it and give it a read. And then if there's, I think now I'm done, so we can move on to the question and answer section. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Yes, we did have a couple of questions here, but if you do have a question, just head on over to the Q&A tab and submit your question there. First question we received from William. Any thoughts on integrating MTD with incumbent unified endpoint management tools? Do you think that they should favor the app-based option and leave proxy-based deployment for corporate-owned businesses only scenarios?
Julio, could you just ask that question again? I was unsharing my screen and completely missed it.
Of course. Yeah, it's kind of a long question. So any thoughts on integrating MTD with incumbent unified endpoint management tools? Do you think that they should favor the app-based option and leave proxy-based deployment for corporate-owned business-only scenarios?
Oh, let's see. I'm not sure I understand. I think I think the question is, should we be doing, is a difference between network-based detection and using agents on the devices for detection? I think that's the question. And I believe it's a combination of the two. It's always good for example, if you've got something like a smartphone or a laptop or something, have antivirus on it, and that'll take care of that. You do the endpoint agent, have it on there, because that's going to give you that extra level of protection. The network-based stuff can be used for, as an additional level of security there. Now, in the IoT space, it might not be possible to have endpoint protection agents on each of the different types of IoT devices. In some cases, it is. If you've got a managed IoT scenario, then sure enough, you can probably put some security stuff on the actual device itself. But with a lot of devices, particularly devices that are, just dumped onto the network by whoever owns them, it's not even part of the carrier. There's nobody really taking care of them. They're out there. They're unprotected. They're not. There's no firewall. There's no antivirus. So I think the endpoint agent approach doesn't work for those. So combination of the two.
Excellent. All right, another question here. How do you establish a security baseline for mobile devices before investing in MTD products? And then it goes on. Then we could use these. Then we could use these products, apps, vetting, and device vulnerability management features to demonstrate immediate benefits rather than expect them to counter advanced malicious threats or uncover major breaches.
Okay, a security baseline for mobile devices. I think that the thing there's certain steps that you can definitely take. If you're talking about, just general consumer devices, I would say a consumer would want to have that device, have some antivirus on it, have some software on it for monitoring the integrity of the device. Have some software for, how do you find your device when it's lost? A lot of this comes with the device. The antivirus generally doesn't, but there's some very good products out there. For enterprise devices, then the enterprise obviously wants to have a lot more control over that device. And this is typically done through a device management type of approach. Certainly control over what apps can be installed on that device and what can't. Certainly control over the security aspects. Like, for example, you must have a password. You must have two-factor authentication. You must activate your screen face recognition lock type stuff. So I think those are basically table stakes for the enterprise case. So there is a big difference between the two things. And I think if this is a device that you're using for your work email, sharing documents and stuff like that, you certainly want to make sure that you've got all those managed security components in place. And so they can't be tampered with by the end user, because it's usually tampering by the end user that disables these security features.
Excellent. Okay, next question from Mike here. Where are vulnerabilities best mitigated? Governments, carriers / ISPs, web scalers, private companies, end user?
Vulnerabilities are typically in the underlying operating system, or perhaps which is software, or firmware. Okay, so in other words, the vulnerabilities are typically associated with the software in the device itself. So I think the simplest place to address those is with the person who's manufacturing the device. So they're ultimately responsible for making sure that those vulnerabilities are patched and go away. Now, that said, the software business is very complicated. So I can, for example, have a phone, and the vulnerability is in some email application that's on my phone. Okay, so it's really not the phone manufacturer, it's the person that's selling the email software that's responsible. So that's what I mean. It's the person who's responsible for the code that has the vulnerability in it. They're the ones responsible for fixing it. Okay. Now, what can governments, carriers, what can these other companies do? Well, first of all, they're the ones that are going to have to hold the software suppliers responsible for the vulnerabilities and for fixing them. And then they also have to enable that quote fix. The fix is generally to apply a patch. So if you've got, for example, a big software company releases a patch, and a government agency doesn't apply that patch to their devices, that's their fault. The patch is available, they just haven't deployed it. So that's where there's sort of a chain of responsibility. First of all, you need the patch to be available. Second of all, you need the organization that owns the devices to apply the patch. So for carriers and service providers, they can, I think, help out their end users, perhaps, and offer a service. But really, in terms of vulnerabilities, I don't think they're so much in the pictures. Most of the people that own the device or manage the devices, for example, web scalers, they're going to make sure that their systems are patched, or if that type of thing. Private companies, you have to have a policy that you're going to be regularly applying maintenance. So multiple responsibilities.
Right. All right. Last question I see here. Are there also banking trojans targeting the mobile applications created by the bank, as the presented ones seem to apply when accessing the bank's webpage?
Yeah, Jen, I haven't seen any that have actually hacked the bank's app, but I have seen some that will look like the bank's app, if to put it that way. But that's an interesting case. It would be, I think, actually hacking the application from the bank would be we should do a bit of research on that and figure out, because it is actually possible. You can take an application, okay, and basically pull it apart and inject your own code into it, your own sort of special malware part. And that would be an interesting approach to take an actual banking app from a bank, open it up, put some stuff in it, and then just start distributing it. I haven't seen that. That's an interesting idea.
All right, not seeing any questions, but I do want to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again. We will be sending an email with the link to access webinar on demand, and you can also find it on securityboulevard.com. Just look in the on-demand section in the webinars page, and you will find it there. I did mention a drawing for $425 Amazon gift cards. So our first winner today is William V. Congratulations, William. Our second winner is Janie B. Our third winner is Federico C. And our final winner is Radu S. So congratulations to all our winners. We'll be reaching out to you via email with instructions for claiming your Amazon gift card. So please check your inbox, and if you don't see it there, check your spam folder. Okay, it looks like we do not have any questions. So Kevin, thank you again for putting this presentation together. It was very informative. A lot of good questions from the audience as well. So we do appreciate that.
Okay, and thank you very much, everyone, for for coming along. And as I said, pick up the, I hope you've learned something from this and from this presentation, and certainly pick up the threat report and enjoy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. One final thank you to the audience for their time and engagement. This is Julio Godinez signing off until next time. Take care, everyone.